Okay, everybody, and welcome as we wind into the final sections of the business of wine for spring of 2019. And just a quick heads up, we'll have the Wednesday webinar as scheduled. It'll be pretty much a Q&A plus a review of the business plan to just go over some of the sections and finish that up. There will not be a webinar a week from tonight. So Wednesday will be the last official live class. And next week, I am going to be in Yamanashi Prefecture of Japan, which is also the wine region. And with purportedly now about 300 wineries, a couple of hours west of Tokyo. So it's sort of their Napa Valley. And I'll give you all a report on what I'm doing over there. I've got a client that wants me to come out and review their operations and their business and taste their wine. And what's really fun for me and part of actually living my vision of what I do in the wine business with my vision and mission and goals, I get to take my son, who's 23 and just moved down to San Diego, who also is bucking the trend of the millennials as the self-entitled, useless generation. And my son grew up in just totally gaming addicted, smart as a whip, never had to study, paid for that in college because he didn't know how to study. But he just, he's making more than I am now. He just got a job with Qualcomm as an engineer.
There you go. All right.
Benefits, bonuses, a signing bonus, and a six-figure starting job, and he's 23 years old. So
wow.
There you go. Now the question is, what are we doing with him and millennials like him with wine and that kind of thing? And he's joining our other millennial son, who's at we got sort of both ends of the generation covered. Our older son's been in San Diego for quite some time. He's Mr. Bling. And everything's got to be top notch, top quality. I mean, over the top. And he works. He was working for Tesla. Now he's working in the solar industry. And he's married and has a grandchild. And that's one extreme of millennial. And then our younger son, Landon, is 23. There's a 10-year, almost 11-year age gap. And he is so not Mr. Bling. He's like Mr. Pragmatic, dumpster diving if he needs to, and he's fine with it. And now making a boatload of money. What do you do? So let's see. So tonight is basically you should be working on your final projects. And any question about the final projects, Daniel, or you?
Just trying to find some more time to do it.
There you go. And don't forget, everybody, you've got up to 4 weeks to submit your projects. So
I might need some of those. But to recap, you said this Wednesday is going to be the last class?
That's correct. And then there will be another week till the end of the course.
Okay.
All right. And then 4 weeks after that. So there's five more weeks to get your work complete.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And frankly, it's very typical that I don't do the final Monday class because it's also a great, over the next few days, would be great for anybody who needs to schedule a call that wants to kind of go over their own personal goals and agenda. And then also during the sort of 4 week additional period, I'm available for calls for that. But next week I won't be available for calls because I will be in Japan.
maybe sampling some sake as well.
Yeah, well, I've done a lot of work in Japan and in China for about 30 years, and yeah, and sake actually technically is a beer, not rice wine, because it's made with grain versus grapes, and it's just fundamentally the process is flat beer. So even though there are sparkling sakes, but it really is, it's a world unto itself, and it's fascinating, and there's great products, and again, people trying to differentiate those products and add value and so forth. So yeah, and it's the company I'm meeting with, MGV Wines. It's a guy who came out of the semiconductor business, started his winery, and he makes wine. He makes a white wine from a grape called Koshu, and Koshu has to be highly manipulated to make table wine. So it's not inherently, it doesn't reach the ripeness levels of what we're used to, and also the flavors. It's a very fascinating process that he's developed. And then he also makes a red wine, and it's made with the Muscat Bailey A, I think is the derivative. And so it's a red form of Muscat, and he makes a dry red wine out of that. So it's going to be fascinating to go see what they're up to try the wines, and it kind of fits into what we're going to be talking about this evening. Who are consumers? Who are my own two kids, for crying out loud? Let alone the potential market that's coming on board, and the generations that'll come on behind them. So let's go ahead and we'll just dive right into this, if that's groovy with you.
Feeling groovy.
All righty. So you've got Tim and Daniel in a box. So, as many people are aware, one of the chronic questions in this industry is, what am I going to like? And this is for the box wine drinkers to the rare wine collectors, to you name it, is this chronic question. And here's the other thing. And this is what I really, the nut of what I want to discuss with all of you today. We really don't take a business approach to the market or the marketing of wine. We really don't. We've got this esoteric confab of descriptive languages or points or awards or critics' choices, or how do we really connect with the market? And then on top of that, we throw all these terms and conditions that really become problematic. If you're making sparkling wine, it is become so occasion-based that over 70% of all the sales of sparkling wine occur in a 3-month period of October, November, December. It leaves little room for business error when you contextualize something so much, and that now also what you've done is really compacted the selling period so that the competition is fierce, absolutely fierce. And what are you going to do to differentiate your product so that people think, wow, that's what I want, that's what I'm having tonight, I want it now. And this want it now attitude, we're all adopting, kicking and screaming. sometimes, but for other generations, younger generations than me, it is, I want it now. I don't want to wait for it. And, you know, we know our FedEx and our UPS drivers on a first name basis. You know, we get everything from our furniture to our soft drinks to our makeup and clothing, and you want it now, and you want it customized, you want it personalized to fit your needs. So there's dozens of attempts to, you know, what tribe are you in, or don't be afraid, but we're going to make this simple, and then we make it complicated as hell. And then the other thing that we do is we use false correlations and all sorts of metaphors and false analogies to help you supposedly determine what you like, and then maybe create some sort of algorithm or some wine recommendation engine. Now, this is really funny because it's one of my primary businesses, but I've been looking at what really makes a difference. How do we get people to the wines they're really going to love without intimidation, without fear? And in my world, it also means without education. This idea that we've got to educate the market to like wine, that's the kiss of death in any other business arena. If you got a phone and it's not intuitive, if my sons and if me, so bridging the gap, if I can't pick this up, turn it on and say, oh, I get it. All right, I can set this, I want that, blah, blah. If I can't do it intuitively, I don't want the product. Same with computers, same with CD, DVD players. Most people don't even have those anymore because this has replaced all of that. So inherently what we've done is we think that if you're a dairy milk drinker, which would you prefer? And this equates to metaphors of mouthfeel and viscosity, which are illusions. And then, oh, what describes your favorite scent? And maybe it's none of these. And who likes woody and earthy? Who would wear a woody, earthy, I guess sandalwood maybe, you know, aftershave or whatever. And then we try to correlate things like, what cheeses do you like? What's your favorite kind of chocolate? Et cetera, right? Now, and I'm not criticizing these sites per se, I'm criticizing the process and the inherent and dangerous lack of understanding that we have of who wine consumers are, why do they like what they like, how can we understand and engage and cultivate every consumer without the fear of retribution and embarrassment, etc. So we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to talk about wine and food pairing. Wahoo, here's the basics. I mean, it's simple. Look, and it looks like some sort of pipeline out of a land in Houston for. If you like medium red wine, then you go down here, or if you like this, I guess you could reverse engineer it. And if that's not easy enough, oh, I'm sorry. Here's a bigger picture of that. And so what happens if you love big ass red wines and you're a vegetarian? Oh, I'm sorry. That doesn't work. And nobody agrees on any of these things. And, you know, and where did the term dessert wine come from? I'll pose that as a question to you, Daniel. Any clue where the word dessert wine came from, or that term?
Because it's something you have with your dessert?
And so would that maybe look like historically people would have port and sweet wines with their desserts in France and stuff?
I guess so. That would be my guess.
Yeah. And here's the rude awakening. Nope.
Nope.
And I'll show you evidence to this. And the word the whole category dessert wine is the kiss of death if you make sweet wines, because you're now contextualizing it. Oh, I'll have it with dessert, which is the most guilt-ridden and infrequent course typically served. The term dessert wine was devised by the U.S. feds after Prohibition to close an alcohol tax loop. And the French always, if you love sweet wines, even Chateau Yquem and really sweet sauternes and German ice wines and Rieslings, and they were never dessert wines. They were served with the meal if you prefer sweet wine, whether it was roast beef or oysters or whatever. And so it's what we've done is if you were to really stand back and look at the wine business and how people conjure up these descriptive things that we do, and if you look at wine and food pairing as, wow, why do we really do that? Where does it come from? You'll find out we've really made a mess of things. And it's a simple science. So when you go out, this is all you need to know, that here's 2 ingredient pairings, ingredients plus prep method, or a multi-ingredient pairing. And then here's what you need to know in terms of lesser or bigger compatibilities. And see, isn't this simple?
It's very colorful.
It is. This one's, yes. And that's also, color is also really nice if you know, because you can follow the color lines and whatever. So that's what we do. All right. So what I'm going to share with you is a lifetime of research and passion and love for wine. I was at one time coined the guru of wine and food pairing by Jancis Robinson for the work that I do and so on. But about 30 years ago, things really shifted in my perspective, and I started to ask the questions that it seemed like there's either a reticence to ask, or that we don't ask because we're fearful of learning the truth. I don't know what it is, but that's what we're going to go to. So we're going to talk about what do consumers want. I'm going to send also along with this a very in-depth study that we did in 2010 that's kind of our white paper for all of this. And we're going to go through it fairly quickly, starting with the premise from Martin Luther King: nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. I have been severely admonished at a great restaurant in the Napa Valley. It's called the French Laundry. And I was trying to order a glass of wine for somebody who truly wanted something different than the pairing wines. And she was embarrassed to ask for something different. And Lissa Domeni's her name. She and her husband Hero owned two Michelin-starred French restaurants. And Lissa's father was the founder of Stag's Leap Winery and Vineyards, that's owned by Treasury Wine Estates now. She literally was raised, born and raised in the Napa Valley in the Stag's Leap district. She was too embarrassed to ask for a different wine, and she actually wanted something very light and delicate and a little bit sweet. And when I had the conversation with the sommelier, he gently touched my shoulder and said, "Sir, if you knew anything about wine and food pairing, you would know these are the correct choices." I do not blame the individual, but even at the highest level, there is zero hospitality in this industry. It's not about the guest. It's about some other BS stuff that we've concocted that has nothing to do with any reality, any history, any traditions, or any truth. So that's what we're going to do. All right. I'm going to try to play this. You recognize who this is?
It's a clip from Frasier.
No, this is Niles from Frasier.
Yeah, Niles from Frasier, right.
Right. And this is going to be a conversation Niles is having with Frasier about Roz and about whether she is actually certifiably crazy. And they're going to conclude she's a threat to herself because of her wine preferences, that obviously she's below average intelligence. And what I want you to do is listen to this as a gatekeeper to the industry and ask the question, what the hell's wrong with us to allow this kind of thing to occur and to be okay with it? We'll see if it plays, but if not, I'll go through it. All right, here we go.
Borderline. She ever acted delusional? Well, she often claims that she's responsible for the success of our show. Gilding. Does she display below average intelligence? She once ordered a bottle of white Zinfandel. Go to her, she's a threat to herself, and maybe even let the woman drive.
So here it is on national TV that if you like white Zinfandel, you're of below average intelligence, you're delusional, and it's amazing that they even let you drive. You are so unwashed, you are so, something's wrong with you. And this pisses me off. Because we should, all of us, celebrate the diversity of wines that are available. We've got so much baggage, so much bad information about wine and where it comes from. There's over 100,000 wines in the US alone on a day-to-day basis, 100,000. And even the experts can't agree on what's great wine and what's trash, okay? And so if you stand as a business person and look at the global opportunity for wine, and then look at that kind of disenfranchisement and embarrassment that my mother-in-law, who's a PhD in economics, who's been a semi-pro tour golfer, who's a millionaire, who taught university level economics, she's being told that she's delusional, she's of below average intelligence, and she's a threat to herself because of the wine she likes. And we don't look at the market as a market of opportunity. We actually go back asswards and look at the values we've created, the context, what wine's appropriate on a picnic or in the summer or for this occasion or that matches with this. So what we've done is we've created, and we, the industry, are the ones who need educating, not necessarily the market, unless they ask, unless they show an inclination or a desire to become educated. And then we really better look at the material that we're educating people about, all right? Because it's us that's creating the confusion, the intimidation, the disenfranchised. We're not even aware of what the real opportunities are for new brands, new trends. And, you know, it really just kind of boils down to what the hell are we doing, and can we create a new conversation where every consumer is empowered and made to feel, oh, you love white Zinfandel? I'm going to tell you right now, and I'll show you the data, white Zinfandel and Moscato drinkers have significantly more taste buds than the typical Robert Parker high alcohol extract 100-point seeking wine geek. And we don't know that. We don't know anything about how to actually engage and gain the confidence of my mother-in-law and the millions, literally actually billions of consumers like her. We have no clue because we don't think about the market. We don't look at the disenfranchisement. We're all in our head. So who are consumers and what do they want? So this is what affects all of our wine preferences. Every one of us, every human on earth. Genetics determine individual sensory physiology. I need glasses because my eyes have a genetic defect in this and have changed physiologically over time. Some people have color blindness. There are some people that have hypersensitivities to smell and complete smell blindness. And this goes for taste and sound and touch and everything else. But your genetics determine the range and intensity of what you perceive, okay? And the differences can be freaking huge. And we're just totally clueless about this, okay? So the second set of factors is neurology. And this is how sensations go from a receptor and how they're processed before they start to go into the psychology part of it. And so there's all sorts of ways and differences in how sensations are processed. There are different interactions and adaptations that are all part of the sensory neurology. And then we get to the psychology piece, is what does that sensation represent? You do not need a brochure to tell you when you're a baby, oh, look at that. Oh, it's warm. This is nice. Put hand in fire. All right. As soon as you get burned, now you can recognize, okay? Cognition is the knowing of something. Recognition, recognition is once you now have a memory and you say, oh, don't do that. Stop it. Don't put hand in fire. Don't play with the snake, those kind of things. So psychology determines what different sensations represent. Our changes in preference over time is not your palate changing. It's neuroplasticity and it's psychological. It's reassigning different sensations to good or bad or smart or stupid or pretty or not and those kind of things. So we've got all this baggage like, oh, as your palate matures. Well, actually not much is happening. And if there are changes in what you're perceiving, some people might lose sensitivities over time. Some people gain sensitivities over time. So without actually understanding and get rid of the baggage, oh, as your palate matures, we have no way to understand what the dynamics and what the factors are because we base it all on BS. And so it's the psychology that is your likes and your dislikes and your passions and your aversions and your expectations in all of this over time. Yes, preferences do change over time, and it is by and far largely psychologically and very little to do with changes in your palate. So what happens is you get even the top wine experts, oh, this is rich and it's so smooth and delicious. And there's another expert tasting the same exact wine out of the same bottle in a judging at a dinner at some expert confab. And you couldn't even imagine that they're describing the same thing, because for one person who it's smooth and rich and beautiful, another person saying, are you kidding? This is it. The alcohol's way too high. This is unbalanced. It's got too much new oak. It's crap. And so it's kind of like the Sufi parable that's pictured here of trying to explain what the elephant is. Is it a wall? Is it a rope? Is it a snake? Et cetera, et cetera. And so what we've been learning, it's your individual perception that affects what you perceive. This is the genetics and so forth. Then in turn, it this dictates how we evaluate, how we communicate, how we mash things up in our head. If we perceive it, we think it's the truth. It's what everybody. So do you see the? It's just a beautiful day. I can see Mount Jefferson just beautifully. When you look out your window, do you see Mount Jefferson?
No.
Well, I do. What's wrong with you? Are your eyes immature? Look again. And we do this with wine. It's like amazing. It's like, no. I tried this wine and food pairing. It's fantastic. But for every person that thinks this is a fantastic pairing, there's somebody either sitting there thinking what's wrong with me or what's wrong with them. And the same thing with wine quality. The more expert we become, the more convinced we are that we are right, and that we try to convince other people to see it the way that we see it. Look one more time, Daniel. Are you sure you can't see Mount Jefferson?
I'm trying.
All right. Can you read this on your screen at all?
Yes, it's good. It's big.
Got it. Medium, full-bodied, low acidity, deeply pungent, papaya, musty ferment, cedar-toned richness, dark chocolate. Any idea what they're describing? And 89 points. Any idea what they're describing here?
Chardonnay.
Kind of hard. You can't even, and what about the cedar chocolate?
Too much going on in here for me.
Yeah. It's a cup of coffee.
Oh, okay. Really?
It's what experts do. If you come over and listen to my stereo system, I'm going to talk about ribbon planer tweeters and all sorts of mumbo jumbo in a language. That's what audio people do if you're sick and into it at a certain level. It's coffee people, it's car people, it's fashion, it's food, it's stuff. This is a human dynamic, but you can't even tell this is a freaking cup of coffee. So how good, and if you had this cup of coffee, how likely do you think, without any prompting, if you were asked to describe it, how likely would it be that you would come up with any of this crap? And so what we think is, oh, I'm becoming expert and I pass this, and we hear people rattle off these descriptions and whatever, and we're just scaring the hell out of people. And we scare the hell out of people who want to become expert about wine. And deep in our heart of hearts, most of us hopefully know it's a bunch of BS and that we're making it up. But then it's the basis, this is the rationale for how we match wine and food. Oh, that this has these characteristics, so it goes with these foods because it's a big wine that's strong and has to stand up to the food, and blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, yeah, some people want to talk that way. Some consumers want that also. But it's a teeny tiny little percentage of people, and we act as if these tasting notes, hopefully when I'm in Portland, I'll see if I can find this tasting bar in there. And you go around in the tasting bar, and they're also merchandising wine and selling it. And they have just got the absolutely most ridiculous ass descriptions imaginable. And it's like, what are we trying to accomplish? What's the mission and what's the goal of explaining wine like this? And is it to sell wine? How does that work? And the more expert you become, the further away you become from being able to communicate with consumers. So all this training and this education and learning the notes and the blind tasting does not actually get us closer to the people that need the help in the wine community, which is about 80%. I would venture to say over 90% of the total available market. In fact, there's evidence and studies that show this kind of languaging, this kind of mumbo jumbo, actually takes us further and further away from any solution and drives people to other products where they can order something they like and be confident they'll get something without somebody telling them that they're delusional and so forth. So in spite of our sincerity and our compassion and our thinking that we're doing this for hospitality, it's nothing of the sort. All right. So what we're proposing is a new way to look at the market, to engage with the market, to look at market data, to look at market opportunities, and to help people find the right fit. You go into a shoe store, you don't want some shoe geek who can identify a shoe blindfold them, and they can tell you where the shoe is from and what people stepped in and all this. You'll have certain product characteristics that you will be looking for. But one thing for sure is you want it to fit physiologically. You want it to be the right size. People will buy shoes that don't fit if they're the last pair. Or for me, it's when we went to an event last night, a big fundraising thing here in Bend. And this didn't happen, but it could have happened. I've learned better. And that is, honey, you're not wearing those shoes, are you? And it's, no, dear, I was just seeing how close to the door I could get with them before drag my ass back to change them, to put on something that is not nearly so comfortable. But what if we turned our attention to the market to actually help consumers in a new way to find what style, what price range, what do they think's appropriate? And there are dress shoes and casual shoes and so forth. So if we take that analogy, genetics determine how big or small your feet will be, along with nutrition and certain other things. But genetics, remember, are also going to determine what you taste, the intensity, and whether even something exists or not, which we'll get into. Some people have 11,000 taste buds. Other people have less than 500. This is known. There are a lot more variables than just this, because the number of actual receptors on a taste bud, the type of receptor, the intensity of the transmission, the neurological thing. But the actual number of taste buds, the intensity and perception is just vast. 500 to over 11,000. And by the way, the 11,000 are almost always sweet wine drinkers. From a genetic standpoint, white Zinfandel and Moscato drinkers are at the highest end of the sensory perception and sensitivity chain, not the lowest. And there's not a good or a bad, there's not a right or a wrong, it's just different. And there's ways that we can actually learn what these differences are, how that equates to preferences in a general term, and then have conversations with people once we get their trust, which we're incapable of right now, so that they can say, oh, okay, so you're here on the spectrum of sensitivity and you like this style or kind of wine. Let me use my expertise to find you a wine you're going to love. Okay? So we're looking now at a very, very specific genetic level, and we're looking at what are called SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms, and how those relate to how people perceive alcohol levels. And so there are several variations, and one variation is for people usually at the end of the spectrum with the 500 taste buds, alcohol just tastes sweet. They don't get any burn from it, none. Okay? There's another genetic variation of people that have a certain cluster of genetic SNPs, and alcohol burns, and certainly scotch and cognac and those kind of things, but they can actually adapt to it, and they can acquire the taste for it if there's something compelling psychologically, so that they can learn to like certain things. It's how we change our preferences in coffee and spirits and so on. Then there's a third variation that wines that exceed maybe 12 or even less percent alcohol actually burn so much the alcohol is just too much. And they will never in their lifetime ever like scotch or cognac or whatever. And so what we're learning now is that we can actually correlate very specific genetic characteristics to how people respond to various foods and wines and wine and food combinations. So this is genetic part of it. And so something that is totally absent for one person, going back to how we're trying to explain the elephant, something that doesn't even exist, a bitterness, a burning for alcohol, a reaction to cilantro and whatever, no problem for one person, huge problem for another person. And it's genetic. It's not because they're trailer trash or delusional or unsophisticated. So one of the ones that's really well known, it's OR62A is the cluster. And these are people that get this horrible, soapy, disgusting taste from cilantro. And it also correlates to other compounds. And as you can see, that there's also a big difference in culturally and genetically. Also, it turns like the Ashkenazi Jewish people, 14% of them get this horrible cilantro taste. The lowest is in South Asia. And US in general, it tends to be about 5%. But for African Americans, it's about 9%. And this is the funny thing, is look at the Latino. It's actually relatively high for Latino populations, where cilantro is a big part of, and if you have this genetic cluster, you will never learn to like cilantro. And I can't tell you the arguments, oh, I didn't used to like it and I learned to like it. You don't have this genetic variation then. You just simply don't. And oh, but when your palate matures and so forth. So these are the SNP, and it's also our OR6A2A. It's not something you can learn to like. And one of the most notable people that had this genetic variation was Julia Child. So I guess her palate wasn't mature because she hated cilantro. And if she was able to pick it out and throw it on the floor, she would, or she would return the dish because even a speck of it in the food rendered it unpalatable. And so not only do we not understand the market for my mother-in-law and for white Zinfandel drinkers, but not even for Julia Child. So how do we do that? All right, so Daniel, do you see two tables?
Yes.
Is there a difference between the two table dimensions, the table tops?
It does appear so.
It appears so. Good answer. Way to hedge your bets, because they are identical dimensions. And you can go ahead and take your fingers and do this, or do it like that. Get out a ruler if you want. There's your outline. I'm just going to move that over there. Actually, this one's a little more narrow because it's got that little extra edge. Sensory neurology creates all sorts of misinterpretation of what the heck's going on in the world. And we sort of know it, but we need to know it better. And so the wine that tasted awesome in the tasting room and somebody takes it home and it sucks, might not know that their environment, what was going on with their sensory neurology on vacation in a tasting room and whatever, when they got the bottle somewhere else under different conditions, it's a whole different experience. Oh, I had this wine and food combination. It was fantastic. You ought to try it. And the other person tries it. And it's like, what, are they crazy? It sucks. Or it's supposed to suck, but it's delicious. And so by the way, this can be leveraged positively also for all consumers, because marketing is to create the illusion of context and quality, differentiation, a brand promise that's psychologically associated with your product. So this is what marketing is. This is brand positioning. This is creating that brand knowledge, okay? When I show this to 100 people, this is the spinning lady illusion. It's not a lady, and she's not spinning. It's an illusion of a lady that we would recognize because of the ponytail and the form. She appears to be spinning, but she's not, because spinning does not occur in 2 dimensions. If I have 100 people in a room, about 60 out of the 100 on average will see her spinning in a relatively clockwise fashion. 40 people will see her spinning counterclockwise. At some point, people go, oh, she changed. And other people go, what? Changed what? Because they don't see that. And that seems to be about 50-50. There's so much study done of this and what's happening neurologically. If the right half of your brain is processing her, she appears to go one way. If your left hemisphere of your brain is processing her, she goes counterclockwise. If you perceive a change in direction, nothing different has happened with the spinning lady. Your brain has changed which hemisphere is processing her. In my over 100,000 people that I've presented this to and done and workshops and everything else, never once have I ever heard someone, when they perceive the change in direction, nobody has ever said, look, I changed. But if you really understand the phenomenon, if you understand the neurology of perception, even just a little bit better, you would go, oh, isn't that fascinating? Which way do you see her going, Daniel?
Clockwise.
And has she changed any at all?
No.
All right, now I'm going to try something here. Now watch her and watch the cursor. As I change my cursor, does she ever seem to change direction?
Still going clockwise.
Got it. And so she very likely will never change for you. And other people can actually learn to have their brain create the change that creates the illusion of her going a different direction. And it's just how we work. And so when you walk into a store, when you're looking for a wine for dinner, when you're enjoying wine in a tasting room or a restaurant, when you're on a website, understanding how these things work can get us closer to consumers. And do you see any numbers inside of all these dots?
Yes, I see number 8.
Okay. Some people will see number 8. Some people will have a form of color blindness that means a lack of certain receptors, and they'll see a number 3. Do you see how that could be?
Yes.
All right. And some people will see nothing and no difference because they don't have the receptors for either the orange or these variations of purple. They're colorblind.
Right.
That's all. They're not good. They're not bad. They're not smart or stupid because of this. And this happens all the time with smells, with taste, where you're sitting next to a person, oh, do you get this? And you might be going, no. And again, going back to the sincere ignorance and the conscientious stupidity, we don't know this, so we try to convince people it's there. All right. So we talk about phenotypes. It's taken from the word phenotype, looking at somebody's genetics and what determines what they experience, how life and learning and preferences and expectations. You go to Italy and you have a great experience and you want everything Italian, or you go to Italy and you get thrown in jail and it wasn't even your hash, and you hate everything Italian because of that experience. It's all personal and it's changeable. The life experience, the psychology is changeable, and the genetics is pretty much static, okay? So your phenotype, like a phenotype, is the combinations of your individual genetics combined with your adaptations and changes over time from culture and society and peers and education and experiences, all right? So what we're able to do is break things down so that we can have conversations with people, help them understand more about themselves, and become better stewards and better guides to lead people to the wines that they're going to love. You can go to myphenotype.com and take a little quiz. We break it down into sweet, hypersensitive, sensitive, and tolerant. Most taste buds, very similar, but at least the people who say they want dry wines. Sensitive phenotypes tend to have a really wide range of things they love. And the tolerant phenotype wants more color, more tannin, more alcohol, etc. And all of a sudden we can start to look at preferences based on the individual and not some sort of ridiculous system that we're trying to decide, okay? So very quickly then I'm going to go into wine with food myths and metaphors and BS. You should have a heavy wine with a heavy steak or a heavy stew. Would you agree that's pretty much the general guideline?
Yes.
Pour yourself some Blue Nun, some Moscato, or some White Zinfandel. Pour any big-ass red wine in gently on top. The red wine will float, because the heavy wine actually weighs more, would be the Moscato, something higher in sugar and lower in alcohol, has more weight. But the metaphor that we've created is this goes with steak because of this pseudoscience and the idea that the fat in the steak makes the wine smoother and all this. Total BS. It does nothing of the sort. So cook a rare steak with no salt and no seasoning, big ass red wine, do it with a few people, sip the wine, try the fat, sip the wine, do it with unsalted butter, do it with canola oil, pure BS. It doesn't even happen. Put salt on the steak. Salt suppresses bitterness. Take the bitter pill with a grain of salt. It's been known for centuries and centuries. And then all of a sudden the wine gets smoother. And it's not the steak, it's not the proteins, it's not any of the BS. And this idea of the proteins in the steak and blah, 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 total crap. And it can be proven. This is not new BS to replace. And then there's this idea that the food's going to overpower the delicate dish. Total BS, all right? And then the final thing is that this idea, oh, Americans grew up on Coca-Cola, that's why they like sweet wines, that's why they like Meiomi, that's why they like White Zin. French, the Italians, the English, the Germans, Spanish, all historically loved sweet wines. And if the wine wasn't sweet, it was okay. The national drink of Spain is sangria. Mix your wine with fruit juice. Make a kir, which is sweet creme de cassis mixed with unpleasant dry white wine. Put a cube of sugar in it. So not only do we not have any clue what's going on with wine and food pairing at a valid level, we've taken the history and the traditions and just made a mess of it. Absolute mess. So this is what we do. If it's a cow, you need a wine that'll stand up to it. You hit a cow with a tractor, it's red. And so you have a red wine that goes with the cow. It's just total BS. So this is what we've done. It's all based on metaphors and so forth. What really happens if you've got a lot of salt and sourness in your food, wine's smooth. If the food has sweetness and high in umami taste, and I actually introduced the word umami into our language, which everybody was bitching about 30 years ago. You're crazy, but no, it's actually in virtually everybody's lexicon now. And I want everybody to do this: glass of red wine, some salt and lemon, take a sip of wine, just a little salt and lemon. Try wine, smooth as a baby's butt. Try it with people at dinner. Try it with your friends. Do it in your tasting room. It will blow people's mind, and it is so simple. And if somebody says, well, I'm having beef and it's sort of a teriyaki, or there's, a pork sauce or something, if it's going to be a sweet dish, tell them make sure to balance the salt and the acidity in the dish. Then the wine, whatever wine they like will be fine. But if it's inherently quite sweet, it'll make dry wine suck. And the phenomenon is the same as brush teeth, drink orange juice. That's sensory adaptation. And so what we do is we make these combinations up without even knowing, first of all, what the primary reactions are, and secondly, without knowing the individual. So how the hell does that help anybody? Oh, you don't have asparagus with fine wine. That's what they did in Europe? I don't think so. What are your wine preferences, Daniel? What kind of wines do you love most?
I generally prefer red wines overall. Not to say that I don't have whites and, Pinots and Merlots and stuff in between, but that's my preference is reds.
Have you ever had an oyster in Cabernet?
I think I have had oysters with Cabernet.
How was it? Can you recall?
It was just fine. Just fine with me.
Most people who love Cabernet find it's fine with oysters, and there's no reason to not do it.
Yeah.
And if you have a cherry and have a Cabernet because, it smells like cherries or the Pinot Noir, it will absolutely suck. Brush teeth, drink orange juice. Do it with the dill pickle, salt and acidity, smooth as a baby's butt. And these are things you can do in a tasting. There's new ways to do wine and food dinners. There's a whole new way for us to go about who consumers are, how we can get with them. And this is what used to be the protocol, the essence of hospitality in France. When you serve the Lafite, the Romanée, the Côte Rôtie, if the guests prefer, serve them white wine, serve them sweet wine. And those dessert wines we were looking at, this is one of the first iterations of a wine and food pairing guide in 1961 in Larousse Gastronomique. The body of this was written in 1938. This was added in the translated edition in 1961. But look at what goes before the meal is the Madeira, the port, the sherry. That's not dessert. And if you prefer those wines, you could have that through the entire meal. And look at all the sweet wines, the Chateau Yquem, the Barsac, and a lot of the Grave wines that were not dry white Bordeaux, they were sweet white Bordeaux. And if you look at the sweet courses, Montrachet, this, the greatest Chardonnay in the world, was actually in most vintages, and especially great vintages, it was a sweet wine, not dry. And not like Rombauer sweet. I mean, we're talking like Moscato sweet. It was really sweet. And it went with lobster, it went with oysters, it went with steak, it if the guest preferred. So what we're doing now is we're talking to each other. We're living in our heads with this wine and food fairyland la thing. And we go to tasting rooms, we hang out with wine people, we go to events. When we're in restaurants, it's what you do, it's how you talk and so forth. We're looking at a whole new way to speak to the consumer, to connect, and encouraging that we've got a new conversation, understand why we're different, embrace all wine lovers, and then with permission, let me educate you. Let me tell you more about this. If you love Moscato, let me tell you about the history of it. Have we covered the etymology of the word Moscato yet, Daniel, in class? Do you recall?
No, I don't recall.
Okay, so the word Moscato actually comes from the Sanskrit for the word for deer's anus.
Oh boy. Really?
Yeah, the musk gland. So Musky, Moscato, the town of Muscat in Oman in the Middle East, all came from something that had a strong scent.
Ah.
And there's so much fun stuff to learn about wine that we have no clue about. And that's even more fun than the BS that we're forced to memorize and think that's what we've got to do to conjure up, oh, this wine smells like papayas and cocoa and blah, blah, blah. So what if we all actually changed us, actually changed the education system, put the focus on the consumer, and build trust, connection, and empowerment and confidence? Hi, I'm an expert, and I'm also an expert not only in the product, but I'm an expert in perception and understanding how to deliver you a personalized, fantastic experience that you walk away with the big wow, that when you get home, you want to tell people about the experience. When you go into a restaurant, you'll want to share it with people that you're dining with and so forth. So what could we do that would change us versus what we think is this idea that we've got to change consumers? So that's our presentation for today.
Looks like we got to go take a quiz.
There we are. And we can discuss this on Wednesday. And anything that comes up for anybody, I'll send out a copy of the presentation and also a copy of our original study that was done 8 years ago that's been continuing. This has been 30 years of extremely high level sensory research and working with all sorts of scientists in areas that you just couldn't even imagine. So that's it. Any questions?
Sorry about that, Tim. A couple
No
of
problem.
annoying phones around here tonight. It seems very fascinating. So this is all the information that's covered in your book, right?
Correct, yeah.
But you start off by taking that short little quiz to whet your appetite. Is that how it works?
Well, what we do with consumers is, do you love salt?
To a degree.
All right. Do you know people that grab the salt shaker and put?
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the number one sign of having the most taste buds.
Oh.
It's people trying to suppress bitterness that you don't experience.
Right.
And so instead of having people come in, what kind of wine do you like? Oh, well, I don't really like wine. Do you like sweet wine? Maybe, but are you going to hurt me? Well, people who love sweet wines have the most taste buds. And I'd love to be, I don't care if you're having steak or oysters or salad or what, trust me to get you wines that you're going to love.
Interesting.
How different could that be? How do you take your coffee, Daniel?
With a little bit of cream and some sweetener.
Got it. And do you find some sweeteners taste horribly chemical and others are okay?
Yeah, I am actually using stevia, natural sweetener.
Yeah, I do too. If you tried Zevia root beer,
No?
If you're a root beer, Zevia, it
I love root beer. Yeah.
because we're keto here at my family, and I've actually got keto fried chicken and keto cheesecake, and I can eat all I want of it and lose weight.
All right.
I'm going to leave you with this. You're trying to sell a wine, and you really want somebody to buy the wine and drink it. And they're taking that wine home with them. They bought it online, and it came. They just purchased it at the store. They bought a Cabernet Sauvignon, and they're having chicken for dinner. How does wine and food pairing encourage them to open that frigging bottle, drink it, and buy another one? It doesn't.
Right.
Wine and food pairing is all an illusion. It's not the history. There's no tradition like we think there is. None. We made it all up, and at the end of the day, it's one of the worst marketing schemes we ever could have devised in history. And we'll discuss this more on Wednesday for anybody who cares. Okie doke.
Okay.
All right, fantastic. Thanks for being on the call as usual. I appreciate it. And for everybody tuning in by video, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.
See you Wednesday.
All right, buddy. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.